Today we're going to go over MoleMash tutorial. It is one of the week 1 tutorials on our main computer science principles page. As you come down here to our schedule, week 1, MoleMash. So this is what we're going to be working on today. If you open that up, here's the specifications for this project. The tutorial is going to include image sprites, timers, and the clock component, procedures, picking of random numbers between 0 and 1, text blocks, type blocking. We're going to do a bunch with this project. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you are going to need a picture of a mole to put into the project, so make sure that we have this. As we open this up, we can right click, save image as. Let's find a certain place that we can put it maybe, and I already have a mole saved there, so I am ready to go. I am going to go through these rather quickly. These instructions, I've read through them before, so I would suggest that you pause the video and read through these in their entirety, because there's lots of good information that I may skip over and you would need. So we're going to start a new project. We're going to name it MoleMash in our App Inventor project. So I'm going to start projects, start a new project. I'm going to name it MoleMash, and I have a couple of these, so I'm going to put MoleMash 2. I already have that name, so let's do MoleMash maybe 2020. And I have that one too. Okay, so MoleMash 3. Okay. So we have named our project. Yours should be just plain MoleMash. Mine I have MoleMash 3. Okay, so as we go through the tutorial here, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the App Inventor program and some of the instructions as we go through here. I also have the instructions open on another page, so I can refer to those as well. So make sure you know where the instructions are located. So if I don't specifically refer to them, you know where they are located on your main page, MoleMash. So as we go through here, we're going to need to have several components: a canvas, label my canvas, a label named score label, and a button named reset button. Okay, we can put those in there pretty good. It says here that we want the canvas to be 300 pixels by 300 pixels, and we're going to do that now. So we're going to take over back into our App Inventor program. We're going to go down to drawing and animation and find our canvas and drag that into our viewer here. And it did say it wants it to be pixels, 300 pixels by 300, 300 by 300. Okay. And we need to put next in a label underneath that, so user interface. Now what I like to do is I like to combine my labels so that it makes it a little easier for me using a horizontal arrangement. So I'm going to take a horizontal arrangement, place that underneath my canvas. I'm going to make its height automatic and its width fill apparent. And inside this, I'm going to pair up two labels. This makes it easier for me on the coding section. So my label 1 is just going to be my score label. And for it to read score with a colon and 2 dashes. And my next label, this is my counter label. I'm going to name this my score counter label. And for that, I'm just going to have it start off at 0. I'll explain why I made that decision to go that route versus the way the instructions have it as it comes up down there in a little bit. So I need next to have a button, and it's going to be our reset button. So I'm going to drag that in here below. You could even put it next to the horizontal arrangement score or below here like that. It fits nicely. I'm going to rename that button to be the reset button. And so the user knows what it is. It's going to say reset. Okay, good. We will need to have a clock feature. And so if we come down here to our sensors, you're going to drag a clock feature in here. It pops up as a non-visible component here. And over here on the properties for our clock, it does say that we want to have, make sure that we kind of take an idea here that it's always on, that it's enabled, and that its interval is set at 1,000 milliseconds. So that's every second. So that's going to be pretty important. We will manipulate this later in future applications. But this is where your clock interval's properties are and how it's firing, that it's turned on, and that it goes off at an interval of 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, next we need to add an image sprite. And again, I am going through this right here, so we just set our timer and our clock. It does say set it for 500. I have done that before, but the mole moves so fast at that point in time that it's hard for me to actually hit. So I will set it as 500, but I probably will need to change that just for testing features. Okay, we're going to add an image sprite, and we're going to do these things with that. I will move in now to the App Inventor program, going back into finding that image sprite. It's under drawing. Grab that image sprite, put that in here. So for this, we want to put the picture as that mole that we downloaded. So under picture, upload a file. Choose that file of the mole. And make sure that the enabled is checked. We want our interval to be 500. This really doesn't matter here because the mole speed is, it says is 0. It's not moving by itself, but it does say put it there. Our heading is 0. Its speed is 0. Visibility is turned on, and its width and height are automatic. So those are the pieces right here that I made sure we did. Okay, now we should also see an X and Y coordinate down here in our image sprites properties. I'm going to rename this image sprite because it just, I'm going to say mole. It makes it easier for me to kind of see that there. Now, we can move this mole around, and you should be able to see that its X and Y coordinates do change as I move it around. Right now it's at 150 and 78. If I move it, it's 194, 164. Now it's important to understand that if I move it to the top corner here, basically this should be 0, 0. If I put 0, 0, that is where my X and Y coordinates are finding this position right here. So image sprites, its origin is in the top left corner. So as it is the same thing with computer science, when we put things on a canvas or we are drawing them, origin is at the top left-hand corner. So that's 0, 0 right there. It's not in the middle of a quadrant. It's at the top left-hand corner. So we want to make sure that this mole, when it moves around in random locations, it will pop up and bounce around. We want to make sure that it is always visible. So we need to be in consideration that this mole has some width. I can't make it pop up everywhere in this screen because if it randomly selected a location like over there, then partially that mole would be unexposed. And it could even be further off and not be seen at all. So I need to consider the mole's width when I place this in a random location. I also need to consider the height of the mole because that top left-hand corner is that 0, 0. If it randomly placed it down here, I might not get a full picture of that mole. So I need to consider the height and width of that mole when I am determining its random location on that canvas. Okay, bouncing back, we will get to that here soon. So right now we're going to create some procedures. We have a procedure. If you want to look here as to what a procedure would be, a procedure is a set of instructions that perform a specific task or tasks. It may also be called a function. A recipe for banana bread is an example of a procedure. The baker must follow the instructions step by step to produce the bread. And once a procedure has been made and it has been tested, then it can be used over and over again. So right here we're going to make two procedures. We're going to make a mole move procedure that moves the mole sprite to a new random position on the canvas. And then we're going to do an update score that shows the score by changing the text of the score label. Okay, so as we do this in our blocks editor over here, we need to create a procedure. So we have the procedure block. We're going to do this. We're going to create a procedure. Our first one is going to be called mole move. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to set that mole's XY coordinate to some random location on that canvas. And remember, we do need to take into consideration the mole's height and width. So, setting the mole's X and Y, we will go into our mole sprite here, and we have the ability to find its X and Y down here. And we can set these. I can set my mole's X, and we need to have it in a random spot. So we go into our math drawer and find, we need a random fraction, timesing it by random fraction. we need to times that by the width of the canvas minus the width of the mole. So let's take this here, and we're going to go back into our mole. We need to get the mole's width and height. I can just change that around like this. And I need the canvas's width as well. Okay, so I'm going to place it in a random location. Let's take a look at what we have here. My mole X is going to go into some random spot on the canvas that is the canvas width minus the width of the mole. That way that we won't have partial images of that mole. And we need to do the same thing for the Y positioning of our mole. So I can do a quick duplicate by right-clicking on that area there, duplicate, set it down here, and then change my values from X to Y. And when we're dealing with Y, we're not dealing with width any longer. We were dealing with height. And we need to deal with the mole's height as well. So there's our mole move procedure. Set it in a random XY location somewhere on the canvas, but we do need to take into consideration the height and width of our mole sprite. Okay, next is we're going to do an update score, but we do need to have a variable to update. So we're going to take our create a global variable called score, and we are going to just initialize that to 0. Just have a starting value. So we're going to create a new procedure. This procedure, we're going to call it update score. And in there, we're going to adjust the text of my label here. So now I have this counter label. This is the counter label that I will be manipulating. I don't need to worry much about this score label, as it just identifies what the counter label is tracking. So I'm going to go in here and have my counter label, set my counter label's text. I can do that quicker by doing this, to global score. Now, in the text, it has you joining, concatenating a string with a variable in this particular case. I particularly think it's a little easier to do a little front loading on my designer and create 2 labels in a horizontal arrangement, and then just simply update my label with my variable score. That's my preference. You can code as you wish. Next is we're going to be thinking, how is this mole popping around our game? How does it do that? Well, it is going to be using our clock feature. The clock is going to drive everything in this particular application. When the clock goes off, it is going to call the mole move procedure. The mole move procedure will go in here and set the mole's position to some random location on the canvas. So the clock drives the entire program. So when the clock timer goes off, we want to call our procedure mole move. So it works like that. When I have the clock go off, it calls this procedure, which is right here, and it does that for me. So I don't need to redo the procedure every time. I can just make a procedure and then call it. Essentially what I'm doing is this, only I have created a procedure to help me clean up my code and make it more usable. Alright. Now we need to have our mole touched feature. That's the next piece of our application. We need to add a mole touch handler. So when the mole is touched, we're going to take our global score, set it to what it was, +1. We're going to call the vibration to go off as a feedback to the user, and we're going to call update score, and we're going to call the mole move. So going back in here, now I don't have on my tablet a vibration piece, so my feedback loop is going to be a little different. I'm going to put in here a sound player. So down here, non-visible sound component, I'm going to have that make a noise when my mole is hit, and I need to have some sort of source here. I do have a file from before. We had created a project called Hello Purr, and in there is a meow file that I was using, so I could use that same file there. You can download other MP3s off the internet. So you're not bound to using this particular MP3 file. It's just easy for me to get to. You could look up an MP3 file for like a squish sound or like a yelp sound. So when I hit my mole, it sounds like squish, or like some sort of a scream. I'm not sure what would sound fun to you. But again, with coding and applications, being creative is definitely something fun that you can do. Make this application yours. All right, so moving along, this mole touch handler, when my mole is touched, and we have a bunch, so make sure you get the right method, not flung, not touched down, mole touched. So when my mole is touched, I'm going to update my global variable. So I'm going to take my global variable, I'm going to set it, score, to what it was plus 1. Alright, so my variable is updated. I'm going to now have my sound file play so that I have a little bit of a feedback. My variable has been updated, and so now then I need to call my update score so that my label reports out this new update of the variable's value. And then I also want to have the mole continue to move. So when I touch the mole, my global score is reevaluated to what it was plus 1. I call my sound component to play, and then I call the procedure update score, and I call the procedure to move my mole again. We should test it at this point in time. Let's see what we can do to get this up and running. I'm going to connect my AI companion that I have here. Okay, my mole is moving around in a very limited spot there. 300 pixels by 300 pixels. I think that we should play around and make that a little bit bigger, but let's just see if this is working. As you can see, it's moving around pretty quick. In fact, every half a second. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. So hopefully I can catch this mole. Oh, I got one. Score is 1, and I had the feedback of the cat. I got it twice now. Okay, so it's working. What does reset do? We haven't figured out the reset button. Let's do that now. So our reset button, we need to go back into our program here, and we need to have that reset button. We're going to reset the score back to 0. So our score is a variable, so our reset button needs to reset that variable and then call update score. So I'm going to reset my variable, set score back to 0, and I need to call my update score after that has been reevaluated. So let's see if I refresh my companion. Go back and check on that. All right, so we're new here, moving around. I got a 1, 2, and I reset, my score goes back to 0. Okay, a couple quick tricks here I think would make this a little bit easier on the user. Not a ton of work, but I do think that our canvas can probably be a little bit bigger. I'm going to go with, let's say, I like percentages. I'm going to go with, I think I can go 100% across. No, not height. I'd say let's go 75% height, and width. It's going to be 100%. It's going to give me more area for that mole to move around in. And I want to make my label, this whole thing, a little bit larger. Try to do that. Yeah. So I'm going to make that bigger so it's easier for me to see. Make that larger as well. So now going back in, it's a little easier to see. Plus that mole has more territory to move around in. Okay. Alright, so let's go back into our specs, see how we're doing. And I believe that we have completed our MoleMash tutorial. We will do some variations on this. It says here, make the game vary the speed of the mole in response to how well the player is doing. To vary how quickly the mole moves, you'll need to change the mole's timer interval property. Keep track of when the player hits the mole and when the player misses the mole, and show a score of both hits and misses. To do this, you'll need to define touch handlers for both the mole, same as now, and for my canvas. One subtle issue. If the player touches the mole, does that also count for a my canvas touch? And that is yes, both events will be handled with that. So this is a variation that you should be working on and is a future project for our course. All right, MoleMash tutorial. There you go.